Mary, how long have you known me?
Let's see. Your daughter was this high?
Maddie was this high?
Yeah. Okay. She was dressed in a little tutu, getting ready to go do dance class.
Okay.
And we were working on your dad's mineral collection. So that
was it debuted in 08. So it would probably be like 06. 06, 07.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So more than a couple of years.
More than a couple of years.
So when you were on the phone listening to what was happening in Pakistan,
right?
Your anxiety level on a scale of,
oh God, it was 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10.
You sure it wasn't 11 or 12?
Okay, it even might have bridged into 11 or 12. And I wouldn't call it anxiety. I would call it more like distress. I was just like, oh my God, listening, and because you can't see, and all you can do is hear what's happening, and you're like, and you don't understand half the language, and everybody's trying to talk at once, so you're trying to figure out what's going on. And then when you hear like this accolade at the end where they're all like celebrating and it's down, then you're like, oh, okay, good. So yeah, it was intense, for sure.
Okay, so have there been other instances at that level for you in all the years that you've been out there looking for stuff?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, but different. There's been different occasions. Working with Pedionera, I was privy to seeing some of the world's greatest tourmalines coming out. So every time I went down, even though it wasn't at the moment of discovery, I was seeing things that were just discovered, and they were some of the world's most incredible crystals and mineral specimens that have ever been recovered from anywhere. So that alone is like amazing. From a distress aspect, sort of like maybe my days in Russia with the being chased by the mafia
in the early days,
jumping out of windows and stuff like that. That was definitely scary.
You were just adventuring at that point.
That was just the beginning. I was 19. I was just having fun.
And then when you were looking at the gold,
Eagle's Nest,
and you actually got to be in the pocket.
Yeah, that was a 15. That was unbelievable. It was surreal. You get like a fever that you can't explain when you're in that environment. And I had never had it before. And it was like we were all in there and we were like trying to process what was going on, and there was like 6 of us all moving in one space, and it was
and space is tight,
and
it's wet,
and it's wet, and it's cold, and it's late, and you're tired, and all of that stuff, and you don't know any of that. You don't realize that's happening, and you come out.
You're conscious.
You're not. You're just almost in this like this. You're in another. You've totally zoned everything out. It's one of the few places or times when I can actually take my head out of my head. And I'm not like...
You're not calculating everything out?
Exactly. I can actually, I'm just there. Another time is when I'm skiing. Another time is when I'm with family and loved ones. And that's all a great thing. But that's in my professional career, one of the places where I can just disconnect and go in. I'm not thinking about my phone, who's calling me, who's finding minerals in China or Mexico. It's all just right there at that moment.
Focus at that
moment. I'm present. I'm fully present.
Yeah.
Which is fun.
Had you experienced that before?
No. Never.
So that's why it's a 15.
Yeah, that's why it's a 15, because I was trying my whole career to put myself in that place. The closest that I ever came to it was actually at a small quarry in New York called Walworth. Walworth, which is near Penfield. And I was there.
The great fluorites there.
Yeah, the great fluorites are from there. And I was on a collecting trip that was organized by the local club. I was like 18 years old, and this one guy was mining this giant boulder that was down, and he was working on it all day, and he split like an 8-inch slab that was 8-inch thick by like 2 feet wide and about 6 foot long, and he split it and it slid off and just fell on the ground and crumbled, and in the middle was this pocket. And this was the thrill of discovery. I saw this pocket of fluorite with this one isolated rectangular cube that was beautiful. It was like the ultimate wallwork on white dolomites with a little bit
clear,
flawless,
right.
And like this bluish color with a little yellow phantom, and it had a little chalcopyrite next to it. And so I then just stopped doing what I was doing. I was just watching this, and I was there, and I was experiencing this guy taking it apart. And so I started to talk to him, and I was like, well, would you sell that? And he's like, yeah, maybe. He goes, it's got to be worth at least $500. And I was like, I'd pay that. And he goes, oh, well, maybe it could be worth more. And so over this next hour, I'm sitting on a boulder next to his boulder, and we're negotiating back and forth, and we agree on $1,000. So we agree on $1,000, and now I'm waiting to have it to a size that we could move. And he's like, I'll get it down to a size that you can move. So I'm sitting there with my buddy Jeff Collins, and he and I are sitting next to each other, and we're watching this guy do this.
Right.
And he spends the next 4 hours diminishing the size, and he gets it to be about, I'd say, like 250 pounds. And Jeff is a big guy, and we were both fit and young. We were 18 years old. We're like, okay, we can move it. We're good. And I'm like, please, just let us move it. He was like, no, I'm going to get this thing perfect for you. And he goes to make 1 or 2 more strikes, and he hits it, and the shock resonates through, and you watch the floor, it just go, choo, and flies off. And I was heartbroken. But that was one of the other times where I was actually there at the presence of an incredible discovery.
Now, I remember talking with you.
Even though it was just a little fluorite.
And your mom.
Yeah.
Now, she was the one who got you into this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, no, I was interested in it since I was about 8.
But didn't she take you to the shops or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, so I had this interest that she fed. And so when I was about 8 years old, I started collecting things from my street corner in Queens. And I was allowed to go from corner to corner. And one of my neighbors used white landscaping rock around his tree. I was shocked that rock could be white. It was like a kid from the inner city and sees white rock. I was like, what is white rock? So I started taking them into my basement, and I would crush them and play with them with a chemistry set, trying to get reactions using, all kinds of like baking soda and oil and stuff. Never had any reactions. And one day I found one that I didn't want to break, and I kept that, and I thought it had little red specks in it that were ruby, but it was garnet, and it was with mica, and I realized later it was a piece of pegmatite. And so my mom would take us to the county fair, the Orange County Fair up in New York in the Catskill area. And every time there'd be these shops that would sell crystals and rocks, and she'd buy me some. And then one year, she, fast forward, I'm about 14 years old now. She goes to a retail shop called Fortunoff.
That's what she was telling me about.
Yeah. So she went to Fortunoff, and she bought a single quartz crystal from Arkansas for like $150 in a little velvet satchel. And they told her that it had, energy, and that she could feel the energy. And she said she could feel the energy. She was very much into metaphysics, my mom. And so she was holding the crystal, and she felt this vibration. She buys the crystal. She asks the person where she could find more, and they tell her a location in New Jersey where she can go and visit a shop. And this is a change. This day changed the whole course of our lives. So my mom comes home, she has the quartz crystal, and she puts it in my dad's hand. And she says, can you feel the energy? And he's holding it, and he's like, no, I don't feel it.
It sounds like your dad.
Yeah, and he hands it to me, and I'm like, I don't feel anything either. Well, my mom goes, I feel it, and we're going to go to this place called Jim's Gems over on Route 23 in Wayne, New Jersey next weekend, and we're going to go look at more of this stuff. So we showed up at Jim's Gems, and my mom walks in, and there was this scene. There was like this horseshoe-shaped counter.
Prominent dealer for the East Coast at the time.
Jim was? Yeah, he was a prominent dealer, and he was also a great craftsman.
Yeah, he did all of the intarsias.
He did all the intarsias. He did amazing work. Yeah. I actually apprenticed under him working on stuff. That's how I learned how to work with lapidary stuff. Mom went right into Candace, who was there with her, her
advisor.
No, she had a bandana wrapped around her head and like a feather, and she was burning sage and stuff. And my mom just went right in like a bee to a flame. And my dad and I were looking in the back, and around the back of the room in the shop, there were 4 showcases filled with minerals. And I'm like, Dad, those are like the ones that I saw at the American Museum of Natural History. I said, you think they're for sale? And he goes, I don't know. Let's go find out. So we walked in the back, and sure enough, that day, my dad probably spent like $30,000 with 1980 money. It was a lot of money, especially to us. We weren't, exceedingly wealthy. And that was like, a huge step. And we bought
the flame was lit.
That was it. We bought 100 pieces. We brought it home, and I sat and wrote each one down and wrote all the names and the localities and created a catalog. And then we were off to the races. So yeah, it was both my mom and my dad that, my interest that they coddled, and it just all sort of came together. And then we worked together collecting until I was about 19. So we go to all the shows. I mean, I've been to hundreds and hundreds of shows long before I ever started as a dealer. So,
And then you went to Russia,
and I went to Russia.
and that was about when things were starting.
That's when things were starting. Yeah, at 19, I made my first trip to Russia in 1991.
But in terms of the mineral world, that was also when things were starting.
Yeah, that's when things started to change. There was a dynamic shift in the 90s, taking it out of just strictly science, and sort of it started to transform into the appreciation of crystals and minerals as art. As art and as assets, and as a totally different thing than the chemicals that make them up.
Yeah, it wasn't just nerds at that point.
Exactly. The nerds were joined with a whole different community. And now that community is what I feel is driving that other community, the arts and the interest from more mainstream people is what's changing the dynamic. And I think it's going to have an inverse effect, that it's going to also lead to more science, because people are going to want to, as these things become more desirable and more valuable, and people are more interested in collecting them, people are going to go out and spend more energy trying to recover them.
Yeah,
and to do that requires resources and interest.
And when Jim and I were doing the stuff with the auction house, I think it made more sense to people who were investing money in these things to learn.
Yeah.
Because it sparked that interest. It was like, wait a minute, I don't know enough about this stuff. And I don't know what you're talking about when you say pegmatite and you start saying all these ancillary minerals. What do you mean? And when that door opens and the understanding is out there,
that's when you have
the light
critical mass. Yeah. Everything starts to click.
Yeah.
That's why that video that we did of the King of Kashmir and that discovery, that 4 minutes, we used that as a tool at the Masterpieces art show in London, where we were about 3 years ago, and we had played that over and over, and you can't imagine the response. People, it was so easy for them to understand. It connects all the dots in 4 minutes, and they can then they get what's happening here. They understand how these things are found, what it takes to get to them, how they get recovered, and what they then turn into, and why they're important. So that is an incredible tool for teaching, and that ability allows people to feel comfortable in understanding what it is they're considering investing in, considering collecting, etc.
Well, and I think what I like about what you've been doing is the provenance and the documentation, which a lot of people have never really spent the time on.
It's funny, in the other industries of art, books, sculpture, paintings, all of those things, provenance is a huge factor into, the value of the object, knowing who's owned it before and where it came from. Also for title purposes, it's incredible that in our community it was never really documented before in any sort of strategic way. And so it's nice that I hope that my interest in it is infectious.
And I think by doing that, we're basically pushing that forward. I know that when we were doing the auction catalogs, we were the first person not only to put down who handled it, but what dealers handled it.
Yeah.
Because that gave us more information about time frames and what was going on at the time, and you could trace things back. Before that, dealers would put aside all the cards and not have any of that documentation when they sold the specimen.
Yeah, which is sad.
It was really sad. We've lost a lot of history.
We have. But it's worth preserving. That's one of my goals, is to help preserve the history of what's coming out of the ground now, and go back and help procure the history for important examples that deserve to be, shared and celebrated.
And I think that's starting to happen with the young mineral collectors. I'm seeing more and more as we're interacting with, quote, younger people. Their drive, their thirst for knowledge is, we're getting more questions like, well, who had that? Who was this person? And hopefully we're going to be around long enough to be able to impart that information
and share it, so it will go on.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
Mary, thank you so much. Great to see you.